Let's talk about money, folks. More specifically, let's talk about the jaw-dropping Scrooge McDuck-style fortunes of billionaires. We're talking about the kind of wealth that could launch 1,000 spaceships, buy a small country, or at least solve world hunger a few times over. But, priorities. Fast forward to today, and while the top hats and monocles might be gone, the game remains remarkably similar. Billionaires still pull the strings, using their vast wealth to influence policy, dodge taxes, and ensure that the economic scales remain tipped firmly in their favor. The 19th century was a time of dramatic change. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, churning out inventions, factories, and fortunes at a dizzying pace. But this progress came at a price. While a select few amassed unimaginable wealth, the vast majority toiled in factories and mines, their lives ruled by long hours, dangerous conditions, and meager wages. This vast disparity in wealth and opportunity created a breeding ground for social unrest. Now you might be thinking, that was then, this is now. We've traded in the top hats for hoodies and the factories for tech startups. But the underlying system, the one that allows for such obscene wealth disparity, remains eerily familiar. Today's billionaires, our Zuckerbergs, Musks, and Bezos, might not be running coal mines, but their methods, while subtler, are no less effective. The result? The rich keep getting richer, and the gap between the haves and the have-nots widens into a chasm. Now let's dive into the nitty-gritty of how 19th century billionaires built their fortunes. One word: monopolies. They used their wealth and influence to buy out or crush their competitors, creating monopolies that gave them total control over entire industries. Take John D. Rockefeller, for example. He built Standard Oil into a behemoth, controlling nearly 90% of the oil refining capacity in the United States. From railroads to steel to finance, these robber barons were masters of the monopoly game. Monopolies were just one piece of the puzzle. To truly maximize profits, 19th century billionaires needed something else: cheap, plentiful labor. Workers, many of them immigrants desperate for any kind of work, were treated as expendable cogs in the industrial machine. Factory conditions were often horrendous, with long hours, unsafe machinery, and little to no protection from exploitation. It was a system designed to benefit the wealthy at the expense of the most vulnerable. Now you might be wondering, where was the government in all of this? Weren't there any laws to protect workers or prevent monopolies? The robber barons knew that to protect their fortunes, they needed to control the levers of power. They bought politicians, judges, and entire legislatures, ensuring that laws were passed or not passed in their favor. They poured money into lobbying efforts, shaping public policy to benefit their bottom line. The result was a system of government that favored the wealthy and powerful. While the robber barons were building their lavish mansions and throwing extravagant parties, the working class was struggling to survive. The influx of people into cities, drawn by the promise of factory jobs, led to overcrowding, disease, and squalor. Slums, those teeming neighborhoods of poverty and despair, became a defining feature of the industrial landscape. This was the reality for millions of working-class families in the 19th century. The stark contrast between the opulence of the Gilded Age and the misery of the slums was a testament to the deep inequalities of the time. As the gap between the rich and poor widened, so too did the simmering resentment of the working class. They had had enough of long hours, dangerous conditions, and meager wages. This hunger for justice gave rise to the labor movement, a powerful force for social change that challenged the very foundations of the Gilded Age. Across the nation, workers began to organize, forming unions to fight for better working conditions, higher wages, and an end to child labor. Despite the risks, the labor movement grew in strength, fueled by a shared sense of injustice and a belief in the power of collective action. The robber barons may not have openly admitted it, but poverty served their interests. A desperate workforce was a compliant workforce, less likely to demand better treatment or challenge the status quo. By keeping wages low and workers trapped in a cycle of poverty, the wealthy elite ensured a steady supply of cheap labor to fuel their industrial machine. Education was seen as a threat to this system, so access to quality education was often denied to the working class. It was a system designed to benefit the few at the expense of the many, a stark reminder that the pursuit of profit often came at a steep human cost. All right, let's talk taxes. Today's robber barons, those titans of tech and masters of the universe, have got this whole tax thing down to a science. They've got armies of accountants and lawyers whose sole purpose in life is to find every loophole, every exemption, every creative way to ensure their clients pay as little as humanly possible. They're playing a high-stakes game of financial hide-and-seek with the IRS, and they're winning. Meanwhile, the rest of us are stuck footing the bill, our hard-earned tax dollars going to prop up a system that seems rigged against us. Now, if there's one thing billionaires hate more than paying taxes, it's letting anyone know how much money they actually have. And for that, they've got a secret, weapon offshore tax havens. These tax havens are like financial black holes, sucking in trillions of dollars from around the world and hiding it away from prying eyes. We're talking about places like the Cayman Islands, the British Virgin Islands, and Switzerland, where secrecy is king and financial transparency goes to die. It's a system that benefits the wealthy and powerful, while depriving governments of much-needed revenue that could be used to fund essential services. Lobbying, legalized bribery, American style. Now you might be thinking, surely there are laws against this kind of thing, and you'd be right, there are. But that's where things get really fun, because when you're a billionaire, you don't just follow the rules, you make them. And that's where lobbying comes in. Lobbying, or as we like to call it, legalized bribery, is the art of using money to influence politicians and shape legislation in your favor. It's like a high-stakes game of chess, except instead of pawns and rooks, you're playing with campaign contributions and access to powerful people. Billionaires and corporations pour billions of dollars into lobbying efforts every year, hiring swarms of lobbyists to whisper sweet nothings in the ears of elected officials. They fund think tanks, commission studies, and bankroll entire political campaigns, all to ensure that the laws of the land are written in their favor. And it works. From tax breaks for the wealthy to deregulation of industries to favorable trade deals, the fingerprints of lobbyists are all over the policies that shape our lives. It's a system that allows the wealthy to buy influence and rig the rules of the game in their favor, leaving everyone else playing catch-up. The innovation illusion philanthropy with an agenda. Now, before you go thinking all billionaires are evil, let's talk about philanthropy. Some billionaires like to give back. They set up foundations, fund charities, and donate millions. But billionaire philanthropy isn't always what it seems. It's often strategic to burnish reputations and advance personal agendas. Take, for example, the funding of charter schools. Many initiatives push to privatize education, undermining public schools. So yes, some billionaires are generous, but their philanthropy is often a double-edged sword. The widening gap income inequality on steroids. Remember that whole rising tide lifts all boats thing? Yeah, about that. Turns out when you've got a handful of mega-yachts sucking up all the water, the rest of us are left clinging to driftwood. Welcome to the wonderful world of income inequality, where the gap between the haves and the have-nots is wider than a billionaire's super yacht garage. We're talking about a system where the richest 1% of Americans own more wealth than the bottom 90% combined. A system where CEOs make 350 times more than the average worker. A system where your chances of becoming a billionaire are about the same as winning the lottery, and probably involve just as much luck. This level of inequality isn't just unfair, it's downright dangerous. When so much wealth is concentrated in so few hands, it creates a ripple effect of economic instability. It means less money circulating in the real economy, fewer opportunities for small businesses, and a shrinking middle class struggling to make ends meet. And let's not forget about the human cost. Income inequality fuels poverty, hunger, and homelessness. It limits access to healthcare, education, and affordable housing. It creates a system where your zip code is a better predictor of your life expectancy than your genetic code. The myth of the self-made billionaire social mobility in crisis. Now, the defenders of this rigged system, they'll tell you it's all about hard work and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. They'll point to those self-made billionaires and say, see, anyone can make it. But let's be real, folks, the myth of the self-made billionaire is just that, a myth. Sure, hard work and talent matter, but they matter a lot less when the game is rigged from the start. When you're born on third base and think you hit a triple, you're not a self-made success story. You're a beneficiary of a system designed to keep you at the top. The reality is, social mobility in America is a joke. It's harder to get ahead in the US than in most other developed countries. If you're born poor, you're more likely to stay poor. And if you're born rich, well, congratulations, you've won the birth lottery. This lack of social mobility isn't just unfair, It's a recipe for economic stagnation. When people don't have a fair shot at success, no matter how hard they work, it stifles innovation, entrepreneurship, and the American dream itself. From crumbling infrastructure to crushing debt, the true cost of inequality. Now some might say, so what if billionaires have all the money? They earned it fair and square. But here's the thing, they didn't earn it in a vacuum. They earned it within a system that we all contribute to, a system that provides the infrastructure, education, and social safety net that allows businesses to thrive. But when billionaires and corporations use their wealth to dodge taxes, offshore profits, and undermine public services, they're not just being greedy, they're chipping away at the very foundations of our society. Take infrastructure, for example. America's roads, bridges, and public transit systems are falling apart. Why? Because the wealthy and powerful would rather hoard their wealth than invest in the common good. They'll happily fly private jets over crumbling bridges, drive luxury cars on pothole-ridden roads, and then complain about the state of the nation. And then there's the crushing debt burden faced by millions of Americans. Student loan debt, medical debt, credit card debt. It's a system designed to keep people trapped in a cycle of debt and despair. Meanwhile, the wealthy elite are sitting pretty, their fortunes shielded in offshore accounts while the rest of us struggle to stay afloat. A house of cards, economic instability, and the threat to democracy. Extreme inequality isn't just bad for the poor, it's bad for everyone. It creates instability, resentment, and social unrest. When people see their hard work rewarded with stagnant wages while the rich get richer, it breeds cynicism and distrust. And that, my friends, is a recipe for disaster. This level of inequality erodes the very fabric of our democracy. When the wealthy elite can buy influence, it undermines the principle of one person, one vote. It creates a system where the needs of the many are sacrificed for the few. A legacy of exploitation, from robber barons to tech titans. A century-spanning saga of wealth, power, and the art of rigging the system. The more things change, the more they stay the same. We've traded in the top hats for hoodies, the railroads for rockets, and the oil barons for tech titans. The same tactics that built their empires, monopolies, labor exploitation, political manipulation, are still being used today. The price of complacency, when inequality becomes the norm. Now some might say, that's just capitalism, baby. Survival of the fittest, right? But that's a dangerous oversimplification. This isn't about hard work or ingenuity. It's about a system that's rigged from the top down. A system where the deck is stacked in favor of the wealthy and powerful, while the rest of us are left scrambling for scraps. And the longer we allow this level of inequality to persist, the more we all suffer. When so much wealth is concentrated in so few hands, it creates a ripple effect of economic instability. It means less money circulating in the real economy, fewer opportunities for small businesses, and a shrinking middle class struggling to make ends meet. But the cost of inequality goes far beyond economics. It erodes our social fabric, fuels political polarization, and undermines our faith in democracy itself. When people feel like the system is rigged against them, when they see no hope for a better future, it breeds cynicism, resentment, and a sense of hopelessness. And that, my friends, is a dangerous path to go down. A society as unequal as ours is a society on the brink, a society where the pursuit of profit has eclipsed the pursuit of the common good. Reclaiming the dream, a call to action for a more just future. So, what do we do about it? The first step is acknowledging the problem. We can't keep pretending that everything is fine. It's a choice we can unmake. It's time to stop accepting the crumbs while the wealthy feast at our expense. It's time to demand a fairer, more just system, one where everyone has a chance to thrive. This isn't about punishing success. It's about creating a level playing field. It takes courage, commitment, and all of us working together to demand a better future.